Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and friends.
Here in episode 138, we have joining us Vinny Riscica. He's an e-mobility section manager at Con Edison, where he talks about his passion for improving the livability of urban spaces and why electrification is a key way to help reduce carbon. We talk about what Con Edison is currently doing, the impact of truck electrification on the grid, and the benefits of commercial electrification specifically. He also explains the value of data in making informed decisions as New York's Public Service Commission's proactive planning process continues. Today we have joining us Vinny Riscica. He's an e-mobility section manager at Con Edison, where he's focusing on medium and heavy-duty vehicle electrification solutions. Sounds like a great guy to have on this conversation. So hello, Vinny. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's get the important part out of the way. How did we become friends? Do you remember how we met?
Yeah, sure. So I've been aware of NACFE for a while. I remember when I was working at NYSERDA, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, a couple of years ago, seeing the Run on Less series and being really intrigued by it. I was just eager to learn anything I could about electrifying depots. At the time, I was working on school bus electrification, and any lessons learned from fleets out there on the bleeding edge were really helpful. So that was how I sort of got more intertwined with the NACFE world. And then when I moved from NYSERDA to Con Edison, I noticed that there were some monthly meetings between NACFE, RMI, and Con Ed, and eventually became the person who was leading those meetings. So we meet monthly now. Obviously, often exchange emails between meetings, and I get the pleasure of seeing you in person at big events like ACT Expo.
Places like that are good to just have a coffee, walk around, talk about things. And so, I remember that. Tell us a little bit about your education. How did you get here? What were some key moments in your background?
I have to start with, even before I was thinking about having a career, I grew up the son of an auto mechanic. My father owned an auto repair shop throughout his entire career. I definitely spent a lot of time working there as a kid. He has a passion for mechanics and just understanding mechanical systems that I wish transferred to me. He is a gift.
I think a little of it did, Vinny.
Yeah, no, I'm sure I got a little bit of it, but his patience for understanding these challenges is impressive. But that was my first exposure to sort of understanding how vehicles work. And of course, being the good and dedicated first son that I was, decided to go into a field that helped get cars off the road. So I studied transportation planning, and I started my career working at an engineering consulting firm. My passion has always been in addressing climate change and also improving the quality and livability of our urban spaces like New York City. So yeah, that's most of my career. I was working on sort of master planning projects, big policy projects to help people get out of cars and into transit and onto bikes and on foot when they can. In around 2017, I was working for the New York City Department of Transportation while I was at the consulting firm I worked at. And we were asked to help develop an EV infrastructure strategy to help accelerate electric vehicle adoption in New York City. I had some reservations about this because, as I said, I really wanted to get people out of cars. And being in New York City with all the travel options we do have, it felt sort of uncomfortable for me to sort of reinforce driving as a sustainable mode of transportation.
I get that conflict, and if you don't mind me interrupting you, there is I see it in our work sometimes where people are like, well, why continue to work on the efficiency of diesel trucks? That's just making the incumbent better, and there's a better way to do it, with electric vehicles, or in their mind, and so they can almost be a little critical, and that's a real interesting concern. On the other hand, the thing that we're doing now, whether it's here, we're talking about, diesel vehicles, and you were kind of talking about cars in general. It's going to be around a while as we transform to the new thing. So why not improve the old while we're working on the new and
Yeah.
gain, benefits? But I understand that, and I'm calling it a conflict. Maybe it wasn't that big of a thing for you, but I get that a lot. And I think about that a lot about, and then there's just there's only so much time and money, right? So you focus on
Yeah.
getting, and then there's also the idea of Kaizen versus, or base hits versus home runs.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah.
a classic thing. Yeah, very
No,
interesting.
I mean, conflict is certainly the right the right term to use for me. I can be pretty strong-willed and sort of set in my views of the world. So it took me a bit of time to get to the point of like, okay, I can support this. This is certainly needed. I think one of the things I realized is a lot of people in New York City are not like me. They don't take the subway or a bike into Manhattan to work in an office. There's all the support industries. There's all the deliveries that need to happen. There's municipal services that need to be provided, repairs and service technicians who need to drive around with their equipment and buses, obviously. So all of these things, one of the big realizations I had that really helped me sort of feel comfortable in this move was fleets aren't going anywhere. We need vehicles to be able to get around from door to door across the city. We can sort of move people out of personal vehicles and try and make those larger vehicles a little more efficient. But electrification is a key way to really help get that carbon reduction that I was really striving to support in terms of addressing climate change and also improving the air quality and soundscape of the city.
Yeah.
Um, these larger vehicles, when they're electric, they are quiet, as I'm sure you know and have seen. So that was really big for me. And I think the other, there are some other benefits to working on fleet electrification. You help put infrastructure in place that is going to support all vehicle classes and also, just proving that it can be done, which is a lot of
Right.
what the
Right.
work that McAfee does. So
So have you always lived in New York City? Where was your father's shop?
my dad grew up in Bensonhurst in Brooklyn. He came from an Italian family. I grew up on Long Island, but spent a lot of time in Bensonhurst at my grandma's house. So for me, New York City was growing up in the suburbs. I loved my upbringing and where I got to live and, riding around and playing in the streets
Yeah.
without lots of cars. But
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
time we get to go visit my grandma, I was just awe-inspired by all the people, overhead trains and like walking down the street to a corner store and people know your name and stuff like that. So most of my adult life I've lived in New York City. I did live in Australia for 2 years and also Ireland for a year.
Yeah, so we're a little different. I grew up in a small pig farm in Ohio, so
Yeah, a
far,
a little
far
bit
from
different.
here. So
Yeah,
let's talk about Con Edison a little bit. I was
sure.
looking on your website and I saw this that attracted me. He said we provide power to more than 10 million people and businesses across New York City and Westchester. Reliability and accessibility are central to what we do and how we provide energy service. First of all, it struck me 10 million people. My
Yeah.
gracious, that's a lot. Maybe it's bigger. I don't know. But then to my earlier point, we just expect electricity power. It's just like, it's almost like like the air we breathe. We expect it and need it, and probably more so every day. So tell us about Con Edison and a little bit maybe about what you're doing right now.
I mean, you hit it on the head. We say around 10 million people served. We have around 3.7 million customers, but obviously a lot of those are households with multiple people in them and
Hmm.
businesses. We talk a lot about being one of the most reliable utilities in the country. And, we don't just say that. Our reliability is 10 times higher than the US average
Wow.
for utilities. So, yeah, I mean, as you said, you take it for granted, you expect it to be there. Where our reliability is a great point of pride for us, and obviously that comes with lots of investment. We invest lots of money in grid upgrades and making sure the equipment that we've had, as you said, for decades, more than a century at this point, making sure that that equipment is able to provide the reliability that we strive to provide.
Question for you. Is that reliability more important in a dense population like these cities rather than, say, Ohio or Indiana? I mean, obviously it's important, but
Yeah.
I think yeah, it stacks up on top of one another, right?
Definitely. I mean, The impacts of power loss or disruptions can be much more significant when you have more people relying on the same equipment, and certainly, being in a financial capital like New York City, those impacts can be pretty significant as well. Obviously, healthcare is a key part of it too. We've got some of the greatest healthcare institutions in the world in New York City. They need reliable power. Obviously, a lot of these industries have backup power as well. But to your point, definitely just the number of people who rely on the equipment makes it much more important to provide that reliability. I would argue. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
taking anything away from a pig farmer or anyone who needs power. So,
Of course.
yeah,
So let's talk about the grid a little bit, and just what's I want to get a sense, and I'd love for you to share with the audience, like what it feels like right now, because the headlines are always these data centers and everything's going electric, from our kitchen stoves to cars and bicycles and trucks and everything. So there's this like uh, you know uh, feeling, and I've got it too, that oh my God, we're gonna just be, is this a crazy increase? And so I think I've learned that over like the last 50 years, the growth demand of more electricity, and maybe you can talk specifically about Con Edison's situation in New York City, but has not been that great, because we've had increased demand that's been fairly small, but we've also had efficiency measures where we're figuring out how to turn off lights and air conditioning and the like to save electricity. And so we haven't had to deal with a lot of electric demand growth in the last 50 years. So two questions. One, is that true in your mind, and how you feel that in your role there? And then how big is the demand moving forward, just in general, as you guys figure out how to deliver it?
yeah, those are some big questions, Mike. Which I would expect nothing less from you. But I'd say definitely over the last 50 years, there's always growth, right? Like population
Sure.
growth is going to result in increase in electricity need, just conversion of smaller devices to electric, lots of appliances now shifting right to electric. So yeah, there's been that growth there. I think the things like the global pandemic that we experienced this decade can result in shifts in where that demand comes from on the grid, and what times we experience those demand peaks. Yeah, as you pointed out, when we're talking about data centers, which, by the way, in New York State, there's lots of discussion about that right now and about potential moratorium. So we're following that closely. In New York City, and our territory also includes Westchester, but these are sort of denser environments where we may not be the most attractive place for a large data center like that. But that said, you touched on vehicle electrification. Building electrification is a big focus in New York City. So trying to get all of the major appliances that heat and cool buildings and provide cooking gas, things like that, over to electric. So those are some of the bigger um, spikes that we're seeing.
Mhm.
Some of those can be sort of predictable, so you can plan for them, right? But if you're talking about a transportation depot and charging, class 7 and class 8 trucks, you don't have to count that high to get to the point of, we're talking about like the same energy demand as a sports stadium or a hospital on a depot where, the existing electric service may be suited for a shed, right? Basically a
Yeah,
help
yeah.
for somebody to put their lunch in, and that's it.
I guess with that, then the actual location becomes a bigger deal, not just and I don't know if I got my terminology, but not just the leg of the grid, or the distribution line, but
Yeah.
actually the absolute spot where you need the power becomes a big deal. So, one of the things kind of naively I keep telling fleets is, if you want to electrify somewhere, be a little open to maybe moving it, or having the power on one end of the property versus the other, or actually maybe even looking at a different location. This might be a great time to move sites if there's more capacity in a different place. So whenever you're talking about those kind of huge demands, I got to believe that's a factor you guys look at.
Yeah, absolutely. And New York City, we work with fleets who have multiple locations, or they rent or lease their locations. So there may be some more flexibility that they experience from that, but it can also be a challenge if they're leasing and, the property owner doesn't want to pursue this electrification. But yeah, that's definitely, that the sort of like locational aspect of it is really a major consideration. So one of the things that we do is, the traditional process of submitting a request for power is you submit a load letter. That load letter says how much power you need and what you'll use and what it's going to be used for. We typically take around a month and a half to do the engineering analysis and then give a determination. Is your service adequate or inadequate? And if it's inadequate, what type of upgrades are needed? Because we recognize that these demands for vehicle electrification can come much faster. One of the things we do is encourage people to submit a what we call a site assessment request, and they tell us within, we ask them like submit a 5-minute form. We can tell them within a week or two, we expect that your service request will require upgrades. This is how long those upgrades will take. We're trying to get people the information that they need way before the time that they're actually submitting a service request to us. It gives them more information. As you said, if you're evaluating multiple sites, you can submit multiple requests and get the information and then do that comparison. Does it make more sense to invest in this location where we already are, or have a larger operation out of, or should we move to one of these other sites that may be more suited to early power, or split up the fleet electrification into 2 locations?
Got it. Yeah. So you already kind of said that these truck depots or these charging spots could be, a high amount of demand in a particular, place. What else? What else do you view as like different about commercial vehicle electricity demand, battery electric vehicle demand, that's different from traditional load requests for buildings or different things? And what's different about this? And does that create any opportunities for Con Edison? I mean, we always jump to, oh shit, what's the challenges of X, Y, and Z? But is there any opportunities with commercial vehicles that maybe some of us don't like realizing? Could we use those benefits or not? Or maybe there's none, Vinny, but if there is some, and any come to mind, how could we use that to help you?
Yeah, Mike, you're an optimistic person. So you can find benefits for any.
To a fault, Vinny, to a fault.
But definitely, I mean, there's tons of benefits in commercial electrification for the grid. One thing is, while traditionally, and we're catching up here, but as I said, that timeline is a potential challenge for us. If we can get engaged with fleets earlier on and work with them through their planning process, we can have a sense of when that demand is going to come. It's not going to be, today we need 0, kWs for our transportation system, and tomorrow we need 5 megawatts. There's going to be a process of scaling up that fleet, replacing vehicles over time, right? So if we can use that to our benefit to help us phase in the power, that can be beneficial for us and for them. One of the key things is a lot of these fleets, I would say a lot, many, not all, because there's always exceptions, do charge their vehicles overnight, right? That's when they'll be charging. It's that off-peak demand that is beneficial for them because that's when the electricity is cheapest to deliver and also generate. So it's much more economical for them to charge overnight. And our grid, the demands are lowest overnight. So it's much more efficient use of our grid. So there's lots of benefits. It really helps sort of even out some of the peaks and help, can create downward rate pressure for all of the ratepayers, not just those who are
We've always said that it's best, or we've always suggested it's likely best to have a slow charger plugged in for a long time. But on the other hand, if you're in a particular situation where there's just a short amount of time where there's very low demand, then maybe a fast charger where, the software tells the charger in the trucks will charge between, I'm making this up, but charge between 2 and 3:30 in the morning, not midnight to 6.
Yep.
because there is certain businesses maybe along those areas or hotels or whatever that start up earlier or stay later and and cause a demand. So and let me say this. A lot of people look at these challenges as like insurmountable, but we really do have a lot of technology now around data collection, around variable just management, where 20 years ago we probably couldn't do this software enabled charge management. Now we can. So
Yep.
there's like a lot of things in life that are uh, happening at the same time we have this challenge. So kind of, I don't know, just thought there for me that keep your eye on all the data and all these things, because they might just help solve a problem that wouldn't be solvable not too long ago.
Oh, absolutely. We're huge data nerds over here at Con Ed,
Yeah,
and on the utility side generally, we really love digging into the data, and it helps us make informed decisions about where we need to invest. One of those sort of longer term things that I wanted to just highlight is a few years ago, the Public Service Commission in New York opened a proactive planning proceeding, and this is really sort of innovative work. I know we've spoken about it, but that sort of load request process I described, you're making a decision about what's needed at this site and saying, okay, I need this new power. But we are able to look at the grid and our networks at sort of a larger, higher level and say, okay, this area is going to experience a lot of building electrification over the next several years, or this is where all the fleets are located, where all the school bus fleets are located who are mandated to electrify over the next several years. So we know that these areas are going to be important for upstream investments, right? We can make those substation and feeder investments now to help reduce the timelines and costs down the road.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
like that's really progressive thinking, trying to make these proactive investments now for the future electrification. And I think it's really going to be super beneficial as we see an increase in adoption of larger electric vehicles.
Yeah, that's great work. I mean, that's important. And it's logical, right? We started this conversation off talking about how important uptime, resilience, reliability is. And anything that changes that grid or changes that system is going to be looked at really with a fine tooth comb to make sure it's not going to putz up the those numbers and then cause
Absolutely.
issues. And then so you got to have that sort of high quality, no failure thinking. But also, if you do that, that can prevent you getting anything done, right? Because it's analysis paralysis and trying to make sure everything's perfect before you execute. So I think we're starting to learn what are the questions to ask. I mean, we used to joke at NACFE that the conversation between fleets and utilities were like a middle school dance where half of the class was on one side of the wall and the other was on the other side. You kind of expected, but you kind of knew by the end of the night, there's going to be dancing and laughing and music, but just how long would it take to get there? And part of it's just figuring out what questions to ask and how to move on. I think we're
Yeah.
starting to make that progress. Um,
Um,
given where you guys are, and if somebody, let's say a St. Louis utility called you up and said, "Hey, we're wanting to start working on medium and heavy duty truck electrification," what would be like your quick two or three pieces of advice for them? And maybe we're running out of time, Vinny, so this might be my last question. So if a utility that has not done much work in commercial vehicle electrification and called you up and said, give me a couple of things I should start with or focus on, what would be your advice?
that's a great question and probably a good one to end on for sure. I think one thing I'd say is this is vague, but just get started. I
Yeah.
think there's so many different places you can start making a little bit of progress. We touched on that the importance of the planning, engagement and outreach to fleets, understanding where they're at in their process and when they might be looking to electrify. You might have a fleet who's very progressive, has sustainability goals, and they're from the like corporate level they want that electrification now, but then you talk to the fleet manager and they say, well, we just bought all of our new trucks in the last 5 years, right? So that replacement cycle is not going to line up with the urgency, and And often in many cases, it's an economics question, right? So planning it, being able to provide tools to help folks plan ahead is super important. Being clear about what you think the benefits are going to be, but also the potential challenges, right? We try to really lift up voices from the fleets who have vehicles, and we don't want them to sugarcoat everything. We want them to be honest about the challenges they experienced, so that when we try and talk to another fleet about it, they're prepared. They're going into it clear-eyed. They know that there is some risk, and it's not just going to be a clear win for them, and they're going to start saving money on day one. It does take some time, investment, and resources, and I think the flexibility is really important. Knowing that these things are going to take time. Given I'm in New York City right now, and the New York Knicks are currently being celebrated down the Canyon of Heroes on Broadway. I will quote Jalen Brunson, the MVP from the championship Knicks, and he said, "Keep chipping away, right? Just get a little bit better every day, be 1% better." So we're all doing a great job. We're all working. Everybody's maxed out, but we can do just a tiny bit more. If you take a step back every once in a while, you'll see that effort is really paying off, and there is a path toward electrification for any fleet.
Hey, I don't know how much of a Knicks fan you are, but celebrate, have some fun with it. It sounds like it happens every 50 years.
Yeah, we're definitely taking this one for all it's worth. We're certainly enjoying it here.
Great having you on, Vinny. This has been a lot of fun. Great friend, and keep after the good work.
My pleasure, Mike. I really appreciate it, and definitely value our friendship too. So thanks for having me.
Freight Efficiency with NACV's Mike Roth and Friends.